Hello everybody, Suzanne Kellner-Zinck with Dawn Visions Hypnosis, and we are continuing our series on male anorexics and bulimics. Because those of you who have been suffering silently with these disorders have been neglected by the American Psychiatric Society Association, American Psychological Association, and anything that they do. So what I wanted to talk about today was the rich and well-known people, both celebrities and famous athletes, who have had to fight eating disorders. But I'm going to start this with some statistics to help you understand how this occurs, especially with athletes to begin. The National Eating Disorders Association, otherwise known as NEDA, states that 33% of male athletes in the aesthetic sports, meaning that they have to look good, such as bodybuilding, gymnastics, swimming, and also the weight class sports, wrestling, weightlifting, and rowing, are affected by eating disorders. Did you hear that? 33% of the male athletes in these particular sports. And I did some research on here because I wanted to find out more data based on the actual research, of which there hasn't been much, by the way. But I did find this pretty interesting article that talked about what they found in terms of males and eating disorders. So we need to understand that as the athletes got into higher and higher levels of competition, there were more eating disorders that were found in the men. They were doing more aggressive weight loss behavior, and it was basically sometimes pretty unhealthy stuff that they were doing. They were using steroids, they were using laxatives, they were using purging, all kinds of things that are really bad for the body in order to keep the weight where it needed to be in order for them to meet either the aesthetic look necessary for the particular sport or to be in the weight class necessary. So they felt some fairly strong need to do these behaviors in order to be able to continue to compete. There were comorbid mental illnesses that also had to do with excessive exercising, even more than they needed to do, doping behavior, and of course, the ever-present preoccupation with body image. Two comorbid mental illnesses were found in eating disordered male elite athletes, including affective disorders, that would be mood dysregulation, meaning manic depression or depression. Bipolar, as manic depression is now known, where you have highest highs and the lowest lows, two poles. Substance abuse disorders, above and beyond, I guess, using steroids. And what became clear through these studies, and this is something that's really important to men out there, and especially if you have young boys or teenagers or college students who are dealing with this problem, there's reduced bone mineral mass that were found among the male professional jockeys, likely caused in response to chronic weight cycling habitually experienced by this group. So they're talking about jockeys in terms of those who ride racehorses. But it could happen with any non-weight-bearing sport, actually. So that is something to keep in the front of your mind. They also use fasting, vomiting, abusive diuretics, and laxatives, which led to serious performance and health consequences. There were somatic consequences, meaning that they felt it in their body, with the stress, constantly denying hunger, agonizing over the body weight and fearing weight gain. It's mentally exhausting, as any of you who have fought this or are fighting this certainly do understand. But for those of you who have family members going through this, you may not understand that. So we need to bring this to the fore. Now, some of the people that have been adversely affected was Patrick Deveni, or Devini, I don't know the guy's last name, but maybe you all do. He had a perfectly sculpted body that people admired him for. His hard work and dedication at the gym. They flocked to him for nutrition advice, but below the well-toned surface, Devini's mental and physical health were in such bad shape that even he contemplated suicide. He had fulfilled society's expectations of what a fit man would look like. Few suspected he was struggling with binge eating disorder and exercise-induced bulimia. A former football player at the University of Colorado, Devini found himself caught in a cycle of avoiding food, binge eating to the extreme, and then intensely exercising for 3 hours or more. He avoided social settings and would isolate himself at home where he could control what he put into his body. This is like a really important symptom of eating disorders in men because they're constricting what they're eating. They want to be in control of how it's made, and they will not go out with their friends, which is really isolating, especially if you're a teenager or a college kid. You're supposed to be going out with your friends and having fun. But if food is involved, going to the bars is involved, or going to the movies or popcorn and candy are involved, they will stay home and isolate, and that can lead to depression as well. He said he would literally avoid his best friend's birthday party because he could not eat during those hours. Performance mattered so much, he knew that if he went, he would have to explain his diet or make up a lie. Now, this is a pretty old study. It goes back to 1999. They found that among college athletes, 35% of women and 10% of men were at risk for anorexia nervosa, and 58% of women and 38% of men were at risk for bulimia nervosa. A 2004 study by the Norwegian University of Sport and Physical Education concluded that Norway's elite athletes were nearly 3 times more likely to have an eating disorder than the average Norwegian. The study found that 13.5% of athletes evaluated had an eating disorder compared with 4.6% of the general population. I have a bug that won't leave me alone. It's kind of tickling my back. Not fun. In any case. So what we need to understand is that this is a very serious issue with men, especially those who need to look good. And that goes for the people who are actually in the performing arts as well. But let us get back to the athletes. Mario Fraoli, the running coach and former collegiate distance runner, developed an unhealthy relationship with eating and exercise after graduating from Stonehill College in 2004. 5'8", Fraoli, who weighed about 140 pounds, wanted to qualify for the Olympic trials in marathon. He felt he needed to lose weight to compete with the elite marathoners. He had read bios of guys his height who were running a lot faster than he was, and a lot of them weighed between 115 and 125 pounds. Being the know-it-all 21-year-old dad he was at the time, he thought he needed to weigh somewhere around 120 pounds if he was going to make it to the next level. He lost 16 pounds in a matter of months by limiting himself to 1,000 calories or less per day while running over 100 miles a week. But his hard work to lose weight did not pay off. His race results suffered and his body broke down. Listen carefully to you folks who are in the athletic end of things. He experienced 2 sacral stress fractures at the base of his spine and a pelvic stress fracture that his orthopedics told him was common in elderly women and birthing mothers, not healthy men in their 20s. So understand, when you're not feeding your body enough nutrients, it is not going to be able to function. And you might have things like stress fractures because your bones are not strong. And certainly not strong enough to do the kind of racing that he was doing. So there's many other stories about other athletes, but I want to get onto the celebrities because you know a lot of these people who also need to look good to be in the eye of the public. So they do some pretty extreme things. One of them is rapper Eminem. He revealed that he replaced his addiction with Vicodin and Valium to an addiction to exercise, as in compulsive exercising, and calorie counting. He wrote, I got an addict's brain, and when it came to running, I think I got a little carried away. I became a fucking hamster, 17 miles a day on a treadmill. I'd get up in the morning, and before I went to the studio, I'd run 8.5 miles in about an hour. Then I'd come home and run another 8.5. I started getting OCD about the calories, making sure I burned 2,000 every day. In the end, I got down to about 149 pounds. Not a good story. He created a new addiction. And do understand that eating disorder is an addiction because you are basically having these compulsive thoughts leading to these impulsive behaviors that you cannot get under control, which is why it's considered an eating disorder in the first place. And that's what an addiction is. It's having these destructive behaviors that you cannot stop on your own. You're looking for dopamine hit, and when you're hitting your dopamine receptors too hard, they stop recepting, and then you have to do more and more of whatever it is you're doing in order to get that high. That is the nature of addictions, people. Well, it's a problem. So we need to be really mindful of what's going on and how it's happening in the body and in the mind. Russell Brand, who I love watching his videos now, where he is speaking about the things that mass media will not talk about. And I didn't know this about him. I knew he had addiction because he talks about that pretty openly on his videos. But he was a chubby teen. He was bipolar, manic depressed, had OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and suffered from depression. Well, I would say that someone who has bipolar is going to have depression as a part of that illness. So I don't know why the difference is between the two, but anyway. What he said was, I was a bulimic when I was 14. I had problems with food and self-harming. My feeling about my childhood was that it was lonely and difficult. He said his bulimia continued when he entered rehab, but he's since recovered. Richard Simmons, who most of you may not know if you're young enough to not remember him, he was an exercise guru on the television for, I don't know, 5-10 years when I was in high school, college, back in the 70s, maybe the 80s, I don't remember, but anyway. He was a fitness and diet guru, was a compulsive eater since childhood, and as a teen tried everything to lose weight, including diet pills, laxatives, starvation, and binging and purging. He was admitted to a number of hospital programs before his recovery and since has become famous for his switting to the oldies. That's right. He'd put on oldies music on his television program, and he'd have a bunch of heavyweight people behind him, a lot of them women, switting to the oldies, doing all kinds of aerobics exercise. That was his deal. Ashley Hamilton, Ironman 3-star. He's been sober for more than 6 years, told People magazine that he suffered from bulimia and anorexia. He believed it was a problem before he got into drugs and alcohol. He used the drugs and alcohol to control the food addiction. Although free of bulimia now, for years, within the past year, Hamilton sought treatment for restricting or overeating food. Which means he wasn't free of his bulimia. Not really. Nobody wants to talk about food addiction. He says it's shameful as a man to have that particular issue. Yuri Geller. He's a celebrity psychic struggled with bulimia for years. The Spoonbender recalled, the first time I threw up, I got a rush that beat everything, even live TV. Not a calorie left, all the pleasure and none of the gain. But Geller eventually overcame the disorder through the power of his mind. One day, I couldn't get out of the car. I was so weak. So in the middle of the street, I screamed out, 1, 2, 3, stop! And I stopped it. Ron Saxon, a male model whose 6'3" height and flowing blonde hair once allowed him to walk the runways for big designers, hid a shameful secret. He was a binge eater, a person who compulsively eats large amounts of food in a short period of time without purging. It was a way to cope with stress, good and bad. He drowned his sorrows in cheeseburgers and candy bars, nights of binging. The model ultimately gained 70 pounds, wrecking his career. He now leads a healthy life and wrote the book, The Good Eater, about how he overcame the disorder. Justin Hawkins, ex-Darkness frontman, famous for his skin-tight catsuit, was so desperate to keep his skinny rock star image that he made himself sick and took laxatives. He said it was hard to talk about. It was really a personal journey. It was all about me and how I perceived myself. In 2005, he said that he had switched to exercise as a way to stay fit, but ended up in rehab in 2006 with a serious cocaine and alcohol addiction. See how all these addictions, they can go concurrently, they can go sequentially. An addiction Addicted personality will get addicted. Daniel James, a former frontman of the Australian rock band Silverchair, said anorexia almost killed him. In 1997, during the band's Freak Show tour, he had developed the disorder and weighed less than 110 pounds at his thinnest. Daniel's ex-husband, singer-actress Natalie Imbruglia, got treatment for his anorexia. And I'm trying to find where I had Elton John on here because he also had many issues with eating disorders. And I hope I can find it because it's a pretty interesting story. So give me a second as I scroll through here and find what he had to say. It's in here somewhere. Nope, I can't find what I had found on Elton John, sadly. But he also had some major eating disorders for a very long period of time, which I do believe he talked about at some point in previous years. So it's not a great surprise, but for those of you who didn't know, he did indeed have a lot of major eating disorders, which he did finally overcome. But unfortunately, I cannot find the information regarding Elton John for us, so I will have to probably skip it. The main point here is that I want you to understand that you're not alone, and that people have been battling this stuff from time immemorial. But because it's seen as a female mental illness, men are really not feeling very much pushed to talk about it because there's shame involved. And if they're gay on top of it, it's a double shame. So it becomes really problematic because people like yourselves or the family members that you have and the friends that you have who are dealing with this don't really understand that there's so many people, both really well-known and respected athletes and really well-known and high-achieving celebrities who are on stage and need to look good for their roles. I've been fighting this stuff forever. And in their day, there was no help. But I'm here to tell you, I'm here to help the guys who are completely dedicated to eradicating this situation out of their lives. I've helped many people over the years to do this, mainly women, I will admit. But the situation is similar in that we need to help you to get over the addiction, learn how to love yourself, create personal boundaries that work for you to feel safe and for others to feel safe around you. Because generally speaking, when we are feeling our boundaries are being overridden, meaning that we don't feel well around other people, they feel toxic to us, usually that's because we have some of these same, shall we say, personality elements in ourselves. We are pushing other people's boundaries and maybe pushing them away as well when we don't really want to. It is a comprehensive, individually created for each person program. The average length is 6 months, but it can last up to a year because it really depends on the person and how quickly they can let go of this stuff. Because I do hypnotism and neurolinguistic programming, I love working with people who are under the age of 26 because their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, which means that they're already in the hypnotic state. The younger they are, the more in the hypnotic state they are, the easier the work is to do. As well as the fact that when someone is doing the activities, the self-harming activities of eating disorder, they're already in a hypnotic state. So I'm using that state that you really perfected, or the people who you know who have gotten involved in this have perfected, to help them heal versus having it harm them. It's really quite beautiful. It works really well. But the clients have to be committed 110%. You know, my deal with my clients is that I'm committed to the degree that you're committed, and if you're not willing to listen to your unconscious mind and what it needs to do in order to heal, there's not a damn thing I can do to help you out. because all the information is coming from your unconscious and sometimes the superconscious mind as well. Because sometimes these problems hang on really tight. The unconscious mind doesn't want to let go of them. So I have to bring you up to your superconscious where you're working with your divine. And in that way, we can help you to release all this crap and let it go, along with the addictions process that I have. It's 4 sessions. And it works really well because we are hitting everything that you need to hit in order to be able to have a normal life that's chronologically, emotionally correct for your age. Which is the other thing that I need to help people do, because generally speaking, when a person has any kind of addiction, doesn't matter if it's eating disorder, drugs, or whatever, they emotionally stop developing at the time that it becomes an addiction. So we have to do some pretty serious work on helping you to be able to, shall we say, act your age, behave your own age, instead of that of someone significantly younger than your chronological age. And it's all doable, and it's all doable in that period of time. So if you're interested in getting more information about the program, I will have the information down in the description as well as my contact information. Because somebody needs to help you all, because God knows, I know from the clients who are males who have contacted me that there are no programs for men, or if there's somebody who's willing to help them, they have to wait a month or more for treatment, which is ridiculous in an illness that is the highest killer of kids between the ages of 12 and 24 years of age. So there you go. As always, I thank you for spending your time with me till next time. Have yourself a really great day. Bye-bye all.